I welcome you, dear friends, respected guests, and subscribers of my channel. Thank you all very much for following the live broadcasts and new episodes. Basically, you keep track of the whole situation, and of course, you try to think together, not just with me and the experts, but also with each other. This is very valuable in our time. Denis Eliseevich, blogger, is in touch with me right now. A blogger and entrepreneur, let me correct myself right away, because we will also talk a bit about entrepreneurship. What should be done in this situation? Denis, hello?
Hello, Alexander. Hello to the audience.
Friends, Denis Eliseevich is marked as a YouTube user. Go ahead, check it out. There are also streams, communication, and situation analysis. In general, you are welcome. If you haven't subscribed to Alexander Shelest's channel yet, it's about time to do it. The broadcast format is simple. The QR code you see on your screens next to me is the direct way to ask a question, let's say, and to support the channel. We'll start the Q&A session with these questions. If this service is working, you're welcome to use it. If the Super Chat or Super Sticker service is working, you get a special bonus. I mean, a thank you, a little treat for your karma. And of course, there's the YouTube community. Questions are accepted there in advance as well. You just need to be a YouTube user to follow and submit your question ahead of time. You're welcome to join the live chat. We'll talk at the end. Well, let's start with today's broadcast poll. The drones in Poland, what is it? The answer options are an accident, Russia sent them on purpose, testing NATO's response, or Ukraine deliberately redirected them. I don't think I need to explain why this is important, because it's especially crucial right now, at a time when there's a severe shortage of people, money, and everything else. And Trump is also putting pressure, saying, come on, agree to end the war. Well, and in the end, this is just a pattern. Basically, something like this was bound to happen sooner or later anyway. The war has been going on for too long, and in any case, yes, there are big attacks, smaller attacks, even bigger attacks. It's just a matter of time before this drone war, this air war spreads to neighboring countries, especially since we've already seen this, although in such limited amounts. Let's start with that and analyze this Polish commotion. What do you think? What is the reason for such a serious air invasion from the Russian Federation right now?
Well, I generally choose the option that Putin is testing NATO's red lines. The version with Zelensky is also a good one. But no matter how I perceive and despise him, I still don't believe in that. Why? Because for him it's suicide. Especially now. I think Putin... Anyway, things are moving toward peace. Putin needs to accomplish all he has planned. If Ukraine had done this, believe me, the NATO countries would have figured it out and announced it right away. Another thing is, people there are already shouting, let's quickly go to war with Russia, saying that Poland, NATO, everyone should get involved. That's what sets a smart person apart from a fool. For instance, a fool rushes into war, while a smart person like former Polish President Duda doesn't act impulsively. Duda recently said Zelensky tried to involve him and NATO in the war from day one. Yes, of course he's telling the truth. It was always obvious with Zelensky. At the start of the war, a drone flew in and they immediately claimed it was Russian, but it turned out to be a missile or Ukrainian drone or missile. That's when that situation happened. So now it's just unrealistic for Zelensky to do something like that. That's definitely Putin. I don't think he won't attack NATO, but he wants to rattle their nerves. He wants to see how they'll react, maybe solve some military tasks that way, observe their reaction, but there won't be a war.
So you rule out the possibility that it was an accident or that it just happened and would have happened sooner or later anyway?
No, that's possible too. Why? It was bound to happen eventually, given Russia's relationship with Poland as neighbors, and now it has happened.
Do you understand what a nasty two-faced game is being played here? We have those Baltic tigers in the European Union and among Ukraine's allies who will send a company of soldiers and give everything they have. They are really for the war, they are for sanctions, and Kaja Kallas, she's from there too, from Estonia. But here at the same time, for example, the Germans say, we will respond, we will defend Poland. Now Poland is the victim. In this situation, Macron calls for a strong response and sanctions, saying it's terrible. Kaja Kallas is nearly declaring war on Russia. Kaja Kallas, who are you really? But nevertheless, and Lithuania says, guys, wait, calm down, this is an accident. So they seemed like such fierce tigers, but now when it came to a real casus belli, they're hiding in the bushes. Why?
Well, let's be honest. The Baltic countries have no resources at all, and naturally, Putin would have attacked them if they weren't members of NATO. And they're lucky that it turned out this way. I'm happy for them as well, but I despise how they acted as war hawks, constantly provoking and pushing for conflict through others. Now, as we see, things could be getting dangerous, at least in theory. You mentioned that Lithuania has already spoken out. I read something like that too, saying, don't do it. But again, that's smart. As for Macron, he's a whole different case. He once again expressed his concern and worry about what happened. Let him explain why they bought 200 billion euros in energy from Putin during the war. They're funding Putin, who then uses the money to launch drones and missiles at them and Ukraine. That's why it's called European hypocrisy. But I want to emphasize that this has nothing to do with the real European values that everything was built on. These are anti-values. And that's why the European Union is weak now, because of such leaders.
What do you think it will all come to? Well, right now we only hear a single mercantile approach. Let's give more money for the border, let's give more money for defense. Look, if you break it down and try to understand the situation, you can see that everything is very advantageous for Zelensky. In this context, it's very advantageous. It's all clear why, because he has a whole series of events. First, probably an Iskander missile hit the cabinet of ministers. Although everyone understands, even if it's just debris. Let's say an Iskander is flying somewhere, it gets shot down, and it's unclear where the rest falls. But if it actually hit the cabinet of ministers, half the cabinet wouldn't be there anymore. Everyone sees this, yet still goes along with it. They showed it to all 60 leaders. Sverdenko gathered diplomats and ambassadors and said, "Look, evil Putin, wow, what a picture. The center of Kiev is burning, the Maidan monument." Oh, the next day or so. For some reason, 25 pensioners are gathered from half the village. That's Yarovaya, yes, near Svyatogorsk. They gather everyone. An airstrike, attention, from an aerial bomb, that is, from a plane they were shot at. That's it. Zelensky says, come on, this is, well, basically a new Bucha. Next. The following day, drones flew into Poland. Why is there such a density of events? That's exactly what he's interested in. What will Zelensky get out of this for himself? What do you think?
No, it all works in his favor. Let's go step by step about the cabinet of ministers strike. Personally, I don't believe the Iskander version, even though I'm not a military expert, but here, simple logic and common sense are enough. Second, Svyridenko's behavior was really very telling. Filming these destroyed offices as she walks through them is also cynical. And there's always the message, strengthen sanctions on Russia, give us more of something. So does that mean we need to keep fighting then? So the way I see it, if strikes are already hitting decision-making centers, government buildings, then let's end the war even faster. And here, you really don't need to be much of an expert. Well, it's obvious even to the naked eye. Let's just keep fighting. Well, one way or another, you'll give us something. We'll somehow mobilize, somehow keep fighting. I don't see any desire for peace from Zelensky. Well, from Svyridenko, who is clearly his subordinate, but Svyridenko didn't say a word, let's say, about the girl. She only wrote a post yesterday evening about the girl who was brutally killed in America. Zelensky is silent. Zelensky is silent about Ukroposhta. It's frightening to think something like this could be done intentionally. I'm telling you right away, I understand that many viewers want to think that way. Naturally, it was done. There's a war going on. That's what it's called. A war. I'll also tell you why those pensioners ended up there. The same thing happened in Kherson at the war's start. I was still in Ukraine then and remember pensioners dying while waiting in line for their pensions during shelling in Kherson. It's called Ukroposhta, a state enterprise. Like everything state-run, it's a failure managed by idiots. The war lasted 3.5 years, but they only posted after a tragedy occurred. Now, after all this, we'll try to change the pension distribution system. The wars lasted 3.5 years. How many more victims are needed? We're dealing with idiots, plain and simple.
Well, you know, idiocy, of course, is a terrible thing, especially during wartime. However, to be honest, I absolutely can't imagine that someone would fire an aerial bomb at pensioners 4.5 kilometers away from the front line. Well, that's just it, no matter what. We know perfectly well that coordinates are sold, bought, passed around, and given out of spite.
Yes, that happens.
And this neighbor, and that one owes me money, and that one over there is such and such. Even on social media, people write two kinds of threats. Well, when you get into a serious argument with someone, yeah, the first threat is, I'll sic the security service of Ukraine on you. And the second is, I'll give your coordinates, say there's some general or someone else sitting there or some headquarters or whatever, you know? In these 3.5 years of war, as Ukrainians, we've basically become completely brutalized. So forgive me, but public relations based on the deaths of 25 elderly people from Donetsk region looks strange. When did Zelensky ever care about the pensioners in Donbass? They die in droves every day from hunger, from devastation. No water, electricity, or central gas. Everything is makeshift with whatever people find. And so they sit there living through this war. And now can you imagine Zelensky suddenly cares about the fate of the pensioners?
No, he has never cared about pensioners, whether in Donbass, Kherson, or Kiev. He only cares about his own parents and some family members, his and his wife's. And that's it. Those are the only people he cares about. He cares about the 95 to Kvartal. The version you're talking about, I don't believe in it. But I think we are unlikely to ever know the truth, whether your version is right or mine. In any case, the situation is terrible. Our people died. In any case, it was used to fuel the war. It's horrible.
The process that's interesting is, yes, further communications in terms of peace. Vance comes out and says, listen, we don't see any point in putting economic pressure on Russia. So the White House, in the event of the end of the war, is open to economic deals with the Russian Federation, and they continue to work on ending the war. So both sides are putting forward some unfavorable conditions, but let's be honest, I haven't heard, or maybe I haven't noticed, any unfavorable conditions from Russia or from America, not towards Russia, but towards Ukraine. That's where there's this mysterious silence. Here on American Broadcasting Company News, Zelensky, with the excitement of a storyteller, a stand-up comedian, retells how he was in the Oval Office and he had his own map and Trump had his own, and like, I know, and well, you saw it. This interview lasted 34 minutes, and there was a lot of interesting stuff about Donbass and actually about this meeting. Why doesn't America put any pressure on Zelensky, or is it just happening behind the scenes?
It's a behind-the-scenes story. Pressure is being put on both sides. Another thing is, I constantly tell this to my viewers and my own people. Previously, the press covered a lot, but nothing real was happening. It was all hype. Now there's less press coverage. Occasionally, Vance, Whitaker, or Vitkov will make a comment. But in reality, very serious negotiations are going on behind the scenes, off camera right now. Pressuring Zelensky now is pointless. Imposing sanctions on him and his circle is meaningless. These are negotiations, and such actions interfere. Trump's team are pragmatists, focused on peace, and would approach both Putin and Zelensky differently. But will this help the situation? Simple question. No, it will make things worse. That's why it's not happening. As for the prospects, if we're talking about them, it's very easy to knock Zelensky out of the presidential race with the Mindich tapes. You see, it's basically a 5-minute job. Once it appears in the media, there's nothing else that needs to be done. That's why this is the last or next to last option.
But the Mindich tapes have also stalled. So, look, National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine and Security Service of Ukraine are quietly fighting among themselves over there, right? You can set up or tarnish the reputation of a Middle Eastern country a little, but really, yeah, what can you get from that Middle Eastern country anyway? Either way, both of them just go with the flow over there, you know? They took Kristenko as if it was a setup, almost like Judge Chaos. Remember, they were catching him in Moldova. Yeah, the same thing with Member of Parliament Kristenko, who is supposed to come and probably clear Mindich's name, or testify against the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine guys, who are supposed to incriminate themselves by calling me a Kremlin agent. Well, they're Qatar, well, hello there, too. So Israel can just calmly strike at. They, well, just send a note and that's it. A sovereign country, basically a strike. Well, and they do nothing. They can't do anything because people thought of them as quiet harbors, kind of special in a unique position. But it turned out, no, if, for example, there are players like Israel or players like Ukraine,
Who do you think can't do anything?
Well, the Arab countries. America is actually in a bad position, which, for example, guaranteed security to Qatar, right? I mean, it's supposed to be an ally of Israel, but what will it say to Qatar now? Return the plane that was gifted to Trump? Ukraine somehow extradited an outlawed member of parliament for personal vendettas and to whitewash Zelensky. It turns out that Zelensky is in the mainstream and on top. We just don't really understand, as they say, who is backing him.
I don't agree with that. If we start talking about Qatar now, it's going to take a really long time. Qatar is a country that finances the building of a caliphate in Europe. It's a very long topic. Next, I give a subtle hint. Trump criticized Netanyahu before major military action, saying, "I was with him." Reports said they had a serious argument, a falling out, and might not speak again. Netanyahu visits the White House. They embrace. He nominates Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, why do you rule out that the same situation is happening now? You see, there are people who try to stir things up all over the world, who do, let's say, to put it mildly, bad things, and of course there is a counterbalance against them. Regarding the Arab Emirates and Zelensky, this happened as an agreement at the highest state level, meaning Zelensky made a deal with some sheikh about this Kristenko. This wasn't a legal procedure, it wasn't deportation or extradition, it was just done that way.
With a bag over his head, right?
Well, I'm not saying that it's good or right. I know that Kristenko is definitely not a saint. They all call themselves businessmen, but these are all people who made money near the government or with the help of the government. I won't accept such methods under any circumstances, and based on what I've read and heard, the situation seems monstrous. I'm shocked. The Emirates have never done something like this before. They're truly risking their reputation. They lost investments because of this. Because now many people will potentially start selling the real estate they bought there, including embezzlers, both Russian and Ukrainian, but now everything turned out differently. To my knowledge, they once barred Morgenstern from entering by agreement with Russia, despite him living there. There was such an episode, but it wasn't widely discussed and was coordinated at the highest state level between intelligence agencies. So yes, that's the world we live in. There are fewer and fewer safe havens where the law truly works.
Let's get back to Zelensky. So, do you think the Mindich case will just fizzle out? Because National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine and the Security Service of Ukraine are stuck in this struggle. Today, this Vityak, the one who dealt with cybercrime in the Security Service of Ukraine, well, it turned out his wife had an undeclared apartment. They found 9 million, paid bail, and he was released. And once again, the Security Service of Ukraine says, look, there's a leader, one of the heads of National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, and he's a bad person, not a good guy at all. He bought an apartment in the name of his close friend's mother, and then supposedly rented it from her without actually paying any money. If the Security Service of Ukraine is stepping into these disputes during wartime, something serious must be happening behind the scenes. What is it?
No, this is a struggle for influence. It's a struggle for influence. It's National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, which is connected to the globalists who could organize a Maidan, even if it's a fake one, and who have significant financial resources, like Tom Shafial. And they say Poroshenko has joined him. The Security Service of Ukraine is, let's say, Zelensky's own agency. I'm not saying there aren't people there who actually do their direct duties. There are, but unfortunately, there are very few of them. Maybe just 1%. Let's put it this way. These are private shops. That's why there's a pure struggle for influence going on. About Vityuk, they added me about 2 years ago, this cyber department of the Security Service of Ukraine. Together with the National Security and Defense Council, they put me on the list of banned or enemy TikTok accounts. It's just ridiculous. So, Alexander, when an intelligence officer finds $230,000 in just a couple of hours, 230,000, how much? 250, 230, I assure you, you are unlikely to find an FBI or even a CIA agent in America who would have that kind of money just sitting in their account like that. And we understand that this is far from the last of it. This shows signs of a banana republic. Also, the struggle between intelligence agencies you mentioned indicates a backward state.
News is coming in about this raid, which without a doubt made the news of the day. And FICO says that it is objectively necessary to determine whether this was intentional or accidental, or whether these drones flew into Poland under someone's control. He says that the violation of Polish airspace and the ability of the Polish armed forces to respond are being highlighted by Slovak opposition politicians who handed over the entire air defense system to Ukraine for free without an adequate replacement. It's a harsh mirror. Instead of admitting guilt for this military sabotage against Slovakia, they are screaming in the media like madmen, proving that they are only capable of plunging Slovakia into trouble, writes Fico. Listen, but is it true? Yes, it seems like he did have a rather peculiar meeting in Uzhhorod when he came to see Zelensky at the gathering. But essentially, what he says actually sounds reasonable and fair. You gave up your air defense systems, so now deal with it. They can't shoot down either 8 or 19 of those drones, only managed to shoot down a quarter of them, according to the Polish press. How many there actually are now is unclear. Well, so why isn't he doing anything, or what can he do? He can only talk, is that it?
Fico?
Yes.
Like any small country, there's little influence. He can block or sway some decisions, much like Orban. Ultimately, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain as the European Union's central nations have more power. Small countries have almost none. By the way, even at the start of the broadcast, your version contradicts itself. You understand that with such a precedent, on the contrary, they might say, Ukraine is now set aside. We will focus on our own security and either help Ukraine less or not help at all. Or, guys, you see, we can't do it. Our own air defense and everything else are lacking. So that's still a big question. Does this benefit Zelensky or not?
The Belarusians handled this situation well. Their military representative comes out and says, well, it happens. We've had this happen a few times before. Basically, we shoot down those drones. He says, we passed the information to the Poles, and everyone was like, how? You have exercises coming up soon? He said, it's fine. We communicate and we share information with both Lithuania and Poland. So Sikorsky comes out, this was a statement made during our broadcast. Yes, he says, we cooperate with Poland. Well, Poland cooperates with Belarus. Everything is fine with them. Do you understand that it seems like people are just tired of being led around by the nose? So the official rhetoric is one thing, but in reality, in practice, yes, everyone talks to everyone communicates with everyone. Only Ukraine, like Baba Yaga, is against it. That's because, well, our top leader is like that. His way of thinking and character are imposed on all the institutions in the country.
That's true, but the main reason is that the country is under the control of globalists. This is purely a globalist thing. When everything is blown out of proportion like this, when hatred is stirred up, in reality, we know that off camera, there's close cooperation happening behind the scenes. And that's why the globalists try to take control of all the media. That's why they fund them to keep all this in people's minds. Foolish people fall for it, while smart ones will open YouTube and watch, for example, our broadcast, and they understand that things are far from what they seem. You shouldn't put too much faith in the newsfeed, and it's better not to read globalist media at all, or not to take it to heart, not to jump to hasty conclusions, and not to panic ahead of time. Like our people. It's very easy to turn our people against someone or something, just like that, in a second. They consume hatred very quickly. Unfortunately, it's not the same with constructive things. Sikorsky is a pure product of the globalists and often makes stupid, even dangerous statements.
He even had to admit everything is fine.
And even he had to admit it, yes.
That there is communication. If we try to understand, well, Zelensky's next steps, if this is indeed a chain, well, yes, a burning cabinet, murdered pensioners. Now we see the hype about Poland. What kind of proposals are being made there? Well, basically, remember how it was at the beginning of the war. NATO closed the sky. And now it's just been rephrased and, well, said, listen, how about we teach you how to shoot down drones? How about we have a shared airspace? How about we have joint air defense? Go ahead and shoot them down. Sibiga, actually, he's really got a point here. He says, so go ahead, shoot them down over our territory. That is, you set up your air defense on the border. If you see something flying toward us, we'll go ahead and shoot it down. Well, that's the task he gave. So what could be the next step? So this kind of stirring things up, this media hype.
I think just similar incidents. Well, again, you're making it look like Ukraine did this to itself, but I'm not claiming that.
No, wait. Hold on. I'm talking about, well, look, they completely dispersed the cabinet of ministers. They completely dispersed the pensioners. Poland is shaking up half of Europe right now, they say, all of NATO. And there's Article 5. There's no Article 5. They were discussing Article 4. So this is all being stirred up. And it's coming from Ukraine. I'm just trying to understand the strategy going forward, yeah, of this whole series that Bankova is putting together. I'm not saying yet that Ukraine is to blame for all of this.
Okay then, let's say every such military incident will be accompanied by public relations, something like what Sveridenko did. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, she said there, "Potribno zakriti nebo." Again, the conversation starts about closing the sky. You know, that really gets on my nerves. It drives me crazy. Frankly speaking, when I think Ukraine should join NATO, close the sky, some things are impossible and won't happen. So when people discuss them, it's just public deception and public relations to promote the war. I believe these precedents will keep being exaggerated and the shelling will continue. Now, there's a new topic about electricity, about winter power. I think there will be similar developments in this area, in this field.
You mentioned Sviridenko regarding her post. Listen, well, let's put it this way. Donald Trump, the White House, and America place similar serial threads on their social media. That's how politics is done now, public politics. So let's focus on the murder of the Ukrainian woman. Listen, this Trump just won't stop. He first expressed his condolences. The post was quite long. Indeed, Elon Musk is raising, well, it's kind of an oxymoron, a joke. He's raising money here, basically initiating murals across America with the face of this girl.
Yes?
They found this girl on social media and dug her up. She was there, obviously, in that little room in North Carolina, in Charlotte, living there. Well, she used to live there, and there she had Black Lives Matter, you know, on the door. Well, among all the posters. Trump comes out again and says, I demand the death penalty for this person.
Yes.
He, and here I'm somewhat from a democratic values standpoint, well, democracy here is questionable. In our country, they'd quickly say, oh, Trump is pressuring the court, though maybe it's simpler here. He just shared his opinion online. That's how they behave. Although, by and large, it seems like it's already played out, but they still keep dragging out this topic. And ours, well, it's like they've got water in their mouths, and Sveridenko wrote something there. Actually, it's already too late to get involved in this game.
Of course.
With the public relations of the Ukrainian woman. Why did the Ukrainians miss this, and why do the Americans need it? Why did America decide to promote this topic?
I'll explain it to you now. Let's start with Ukraine. I was the first, then others joined, but I believe I was the only one who actively promoted this topic to the English-speaking audience. And basically, I was pressuring our government officials as well. I've been involved in this case from the very beginning. And I just see that everyone is silent. I tell the Americans, look, Zelensky is silent, everyone is silent. I was just shocked. Really, Sveridenko got involved too late. Like I said, it was last night, and now it just looks ridiculous. I expected the embassy to respond after I tagged them. The post received many views on X. The embassy doesn't react at all. It's a disgrace, I'm saying it again. Zelensky makes a video address every day. She is our citizen, her life is worth no more and no less than any other citizen of Ukraine. I drew a parallel. Usyk is detained in Poland. Zelensky calls Poland, writes a post. Notice how the war, shelling, and death don't stop him. Everyone jumps in. Usyk was detained, let's free him, our girl was murdered, and President Trump responds with a video. I'm just asking people to consider this. The president said a wonderful Ukrainian woman was brutally murdered. We did this and that. Her family chose not to send her body to Ukraine, saying she loved America and should be buried here. So why? That's the attitude towards Ukraine. All of them are silent.
Wait, what kind of attitude toward Ukraine?
Well, you understand, the person came, her family came to America in 2022 under the U4U program. She says she loved America, as far as I know. Well, look, for example, I fight against the authorities, but I love Ukraine and I just can't do that. I love America, but Ukraine is my homeland. When someone suggests burying her in America, that says a lot to me. Maybe it's not safe to do that in Ukraine. You know? The men in her family, like her father and brother, may not be able to leave. I'm highlighting how bad the situation is. They want to bury a Ukrainian woman in America. Now, about Trump and Musk, I'll explain to you. So these are all the consequences of Biden's administration, the consequences of the globalists again, who was stirring up the white. If you remember, when a black drug addict criminal was killed by a police officer, they started putting up monuments and murals all over America, destroying everything. All the globalist press wrote the word black with a capital letter. In short, they covered it, but now all the globalists are silent. This is about ideology. I just want people to know that. That's why Musk used his $1 million for murals of this girl, so it would all be remembered. This scoundrel was released 14 times by the judge. Lalas, I saw photos of this judge. She is also black. She doesn't have a very intelligent face, let's put it that way. And I heard that Soros financed her during the elections. Or someone from that left-wing group, just like all those prosecutors and all those judges who make such decisions. This could have been avoided. It's a terrible tragedy, but I am very outraged. I've spent 4 days on social media, mostly posting about this and wondering why Ukraine hasn't commented on the incident. So does that mean President Trump and the First Lady of the United States, who I know was shocked by this, care more about the fate of a Ukrainian woman than our own First Lady and our President do? Oh, they have daughters around the same age. This girl is 22, similar to Zelensky's daughter. As a parent, how can you not be affected or say anything about it? It's a nightmare. It's a disgrace.
What were you expecting? What kind of words did you expect from Zelensky or Zelenskaya?
I'll be honest with you, I wasn't expecting anything fantastic or any tears there. But just for the record, he could have said, we offer our condolences to the family. Like Trump says, I send love, condolences to the family. And Zelensky could have said the same thing. And add, we hope for the harshest possible court sentence or for a swift investigation. It's terrible. Well, at least that's how it's done in diplomacy. I don't know. That's just the way it's usually done. Not a word, not even half a word. This again supports the theory that he's a pawn of the globalists. Maybe he wanted to, but he was just not allowed to discuss this.
So does that mean you think, I'm just clarifying, do you think there's some kind of group above Zelensky who forbid him from talking about this? Not to talk about this, to think a certain way, to believe certain things, to go here, to look there. Basically, he's being controlled.
Obviously, he was re-recruited. He came to power with different ideas. I voted for him not as a reformer, but just because I wanted to get as far away from Poroshenko as possible. And he actually promised to end the war, not to touch the Russian language and things like that. He was later recruited again. There is certain information, and by the way, it's actually quite public about how this happened. And now, for example, Alex Soros or someone from there could have told him and Yermak not to cover this topic. You see, this is very suspicious. It's very suspicious. It's not just, well, the whole world press is talking about it. I open my X feed and I have nothing else there. Multi-million follower accounts, very important people in America, prosecutors. Kash Patel writes 2 posts, the FBI director. Can you imagine that? And here, they're silent, as if this girl has nothing to do with Ukraine at all.
Zelensky opens up travel for 18 to 22-year-olds, and then the director of Nova Poshta, Volodymyr, co-founder, not director, co-founder, Volodymyr Poporezhnyuk, gives statistics. In 10 days, 170 people left and 64 arrived. It's not that bad, that's just how it is. In reality, people, really, business in Ukraine, the ones that are more or less small or medium-sized, well, some have a tire shop, some have a service station, some have, I don't know, teams to repair something somewhere, somehow, or some specific types of production. Not military, just specific. They're holding their heads. Utility workers, too. They say, guys, people are leaving. Everyone assumes that those aged 18 to 22 are students and must be studying somewhere. I'll reveal a terrible secret. There are students who enroll in distance learning. There are students who go to colleges, technical schools, vocational schools. So there are different
people who don't study anywhere at all, but work or don't work.
Some just finished school and went to work to labor somewhere at a construction site or somewhere else to earn money. Well, you have to survive somehow. And really, they've been working since they were 18. I even had something like that in my work record book. Well, kind of an atavism. Now, they've canceled them. I've had official work experience since I was 16. So the people who work and the businessmen who provide these jobs and organize this work, they say, listen, we're pulling our hair out. They're quitting and leaving. Educators report students are taking academic leave and leaving the country, making this a major problem. At the same time, we keep hearing these strange narratives. Oh, come back, dear Ukrainians. There's no one left to defend the country. What have these 10 days since this decision shown, in your opinion?
They showed all the nightmare and horror of what Ukraine has become, how people are fleeing from it. And this, let's be honest, is a young age group, which is itself indicative because these are people who have their whole lives ahead of them and how they see this future. They obviously don't see it in Ukraine. It's just obvious. I confirm this as well. In talking with Kyiv entrepreneurs, I can confirm many people in this age group are leaving. They take administrative leave and leave the university. Moreover, several people wrote to me that at the border they check phones for videos. Did you film the huge lines of these young people at the checkpoints and they are forced to delete them from their phones? This was sent to me in the bot. I don't know if it's Russian special services playing around or if it's really my subscribers, but I received this information 3 or 4 times in just a few days. Given how things operate under Zelensky's regime, I can easily believe it. Now, I haven't seen Poporishnyuk's post. I know him only in passing, but I haven't seen this post. Well, closing the borders isn't a solution, is it? I welcome the decision to open the borders. The war needs to end. We need to end the war and make Ukraine a place where people are eager to live. 11 million illegal migrants risk their lives to reach America, while in Ukraine, people risk their lives to leave. It's unthinkable, and with this president or the other candidates, nothing will change with Ukraine.
On our planet, on the globe, the first revolution or the first coup by Zoomers took place in Nepal.
Yes.
How do you view these events? There are simply two positions, and they are absolutely in relation to Ukraine, although we will definitely make a connection to that now. But nevertheless, they are absolutely there. How do you feel about the war in Ukraine? They don't divide people, meaning some people just think that, well, like, guys, yes, I mean, they did all this too, well, in general, too harshly. That is, there's no authority, the government has collapsed, it's a nightmare, snotty kids, all of that. They disrespected the state, and in general it's chaos, disorder, a mess, so the young people are to blame. Some think this is just a wild conspiracy theory, because the British set Nepal on fire, and Nepal is between India and China, well, basically they're moving out from under the influence of the United States. Trump makes a fresh statement. The Financial Times writes that soon he might introduce 100% tariffs. Well, kind of both against India and against China. He wrote this post, and basically this is some fierce geopolitics. What is there more of here? This whole fathers and children thing, plus banning social networks, yes, and that annoys the youth. Or really, let's say, some cunning schemes of the globalists?
I know a little about this, and I want to tell you, no globalists, no budgets are capable of raising such masses of people. That is, there's no smoke without fire, just like in Serbia. Only with real large-scale discontent among people can you raise such masses. Of course, with the involvement of special services, undoubtedly. But it wasn't the special services who banned British social networks, it was the authorities of Nepal who banned the social networks. That's terrible. I consider myself the #1 fighter for freedom of speech in Ukraine, and I support those protesters, and those are freedom-loving people. Ukrainians turned out not to be as freedom-loving. I think our people would have reacted more calmly even to a ban on social networks. Unfortunately, I'm only stating facts and reasoning, not calling anyone to action. That's what happened in Nepal. I completely support this. That's how I see it.
Well, wait a minute. Does that mean you support burning down the palace, the parliament, basically the riots and all that craziness? And wait, really? Of course, love for freedom is good, but is it worth banning social networks or not?
Yes, freedom is the most important value in my system, and biologically it's the main value for people. You can give a person everything, just like, for example, Gaddafi once gave everything in his country. The intelligence services were blamed and involved, but the real issue was a lack of freedom, and Gaddafi lacked the strength. Putin did this in Russia by taking away people's freedom. Putin leads one of the world's most powerful organizations, the KGB, which lets him maintain control. If a regime is weak, it collapses like in Nepal, where the state wasn't as ruthless and the Zoomers prevailed. Freedom of speech is the foundation of democracy and the most fundamental thing. Without it, nothing else is possible. How can someone make good decisions if they're cut off from information? Voting and choosing whom to support are crucial.
But why is it different in Ukraine?
Why don't people do that?
Well, why, look, yes, we see again some bright flashes. A riot in Lutsk against the Territorial Recruitment Center, right? But for us, it's absolutely normal, and it's considered a healthy patriotic attitude. Take, for example, how Poroshenko speaks from the podium in the Verkhovna Rada, let's ban Telegram. Or how all these Yochishins and others say, yes, let's ban TikTok, let's block everything. For us, that's normal and how it's seen. Like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if everyone reacts calmly. If, for example, they just take away some service, not just block someone on it, but simply take it away and say, no, you can't use it. Telegram, goodbye.
Well, Sash, we can't ignore the fact that there's a war in the country, martial law, it really holds things back. Also, I must admit, Zelensky has built strong organizations and special services that intimidate people, operating much like Russian ones. All this can't be denied. But I also don't see any great love of freedom among our people, despite myths about how freedom-loving they are. It turned out to be just a myth. We are a post-communist country, we've gone through all these Stalinist things, and somewhere this fear apparently remains in the genes of people in this territory. And that's why our people react to this more calmly. By the way, about Poroshenko, a first-degree hypocrite. He writes a post on Facebook. He pins his first comment. If you want to avoid Facebook censorship, join my Telegram channel. He shouts from the podium to ban it. That's the problem with Ukrainian politics. These names shouldn't be on the political horizon. I urge people to reject all the names that have been involved in politics up to this point.
So who should we vote for? A pig in a poke?
Yes, a pig in a poke. And people need to want something new. Their patience should run out. They should want something new, some changes. Ukraine can't survive if this continues. A pig in a poke, 10 pigs in a poke, and they'll pick one. But in reality, any pig in a poke loses its mystery, since anyone's background can be checked. And to come out at such debates, like in normal civilized countries, and argue your point of view, people will make their decision, make their choice.
There were very good debates at the stadium, and Ukraine liked it.
It was a show. Yes, our people, well, that's the whole point. Our people were not developed enough in terms of understanding, at least back then. And so such a show happened. A terrible show, I would say.
So what?
Two options, both wrong.
Wait, how is this cat in the bag who refuses to give up power and extends their term citing war any different from the new cat in the bag?
Zelensky isn't an unknown. He's a creation of the oligarchs, having always worked and profited with them. He was their political tool, even before entering politics. The 95th Quartal stage aimed to eliminate political rivals, often not of Zelensky's choosing, as scripts were handed to him. These should be handled one way, those another. This was happening, so he's not a mystery. He's a clear, understandable person. Yes, he's been re-recruited, but his personality is obvious. A product of the oligarchs, by the way, a Soviet to the core.
What should Ukrainians do with Zelensky?
Oh, it's scary to even say such a thing. But to remove him from power in a democratic way. Demand elections. We won't achieve anything from Zelensky. We must urge the international community, especially the so-called great democrats of the European Union and Macron, to hold elections in Ukraine. Hold elections in Ukraine. The president's term has expired, causing a political crisis and a difficult situation. Obviously, he is not ready to make difficult decisions about ending the war, so let's choose someone who will be ready to take that responsibility. A historic mission, probably not a very pleasant one. That's how the question should be posed. And should we ask or wait for Zelensky to do something? The man is totally out of touch with reality, having been sheltered. People mean nothing to him. They're just statistics and numbers. I don't expect anything from him. I'm waiting for President Trump.
You see, it's a strange thing. It seems that Trump no longer has any weight or influence on Zelensky and on Zelensky's decision-making system. And Ukraine has turned into, like a sheet wrapped itself in negative sovereignty. You guys handle it yourselves. Things are complicated for them too. India, China, the United States, then Europe, and Europe says we're not refusing. Well, they're writing this live right now. It's 5:47 post-meridium here, and the Western press is reporting, I think it's the New York Times or maybe Reuters, in short, that Europe refused Trump. And the Americans are pressuring Europe, saying, come on, impose sanctions to refuse Russian, even processed Russian products. Well, in general, there are a lot of problems there. Everyone has kind of forgotten about Greenland a little. Well, I'm just making a note for the future. Everyone has forgotten about Greenland and Canada. But there, some very interesting things are going to start happening. If, for example, the confrontation over Ukraine suddenly ends, the United States and Russia will start cooperating. Well, for some projects, big or small, America will really need Greenland and Canada, and basically all of that will come back into play. Don't think that it's all just talk and then forgotten. So it seems like Trump doesn't have any leverage over Zelensky, and Zelensky's only trump card is simply the ability to disrupt whatever agreement they might reach.
You said it right, it seems. Indeed, that's how it seems to many people. Now, it's a kind of disappointment in people and a desire to get a magic pill that will quickly solve everything. The processes are global. The processes are complex, more complex than we would like, a bit more than we are able to understand. As I already said, Trump is pragmatic, and he's pushing toward his goal like a tank. Yes, the tactics were chosen, now they're different, and after he achieves his result, well, some very serious things will begin. The only exception might be if he and his team finally see that it's absolutely impossible to make a deal with this person under any circumstances. So Zelensky, secretly from us, from everyone, still outlined a rough agreement to end the war. For example, security guarantees, and you've heard, he keeps shouting, take us into the European Union. That's a security guarantee. For some reason, he decided that for himself. Take us into the European Union. For what purpose? Zelensky is a historic president who brought Ukraine into the European Union, which alone is enough for elections. However, just yesterday, a European Union representative said Ukraine has no chance, not even starting the entry process, and criticized sanctions on citizens, including me and my family, and political persecution. And this is not the norm in the European Union, so there will be no European Union for anyone.
And some people think that there will be...
No, that's their right. I'm telling you what he outlined regarding security guarantees.
No, why? Wait, why does Putin say, yes, please, go ahead and join?
Well, in a way, it's a bluff, but even if it happened, it doesn't threaten Russia at all, because we no longer trade with Russia. Previously, Ukraine and Russia had significant trade when discussing the customs union or Europe, but that's no longer the case. Zelensky's statement is amusing because the European Union is an economic and political union, not a military alliance, and doesn't threaten Putin's interests. NATO does.
Yes.
And he himself doesn't believe that they'll let us in. That's why he's bluffing like that.
So, the latest news about the situation around Poland is that Russia is offering Poland to hold bilateral talks regarding the drones that entered its territory, which Moscow calls unintentional. So, despite the apparent groundlessness of the insinuations coming from Warsaw, in order to fully clarify the situation for all parties interested in preventing a general escalation, the Russian Ministry of Defense is ready to hold consultations on this topic with the Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Poland. Well, look, this is a completely different matter, you see what I mean? The game has reached a whole new level here. Well, I mean, the Russians don't really deny that these are, well, they're, drones, but on the other hand, they're like, yeah, we didn't send them. I mean, we didn't send them. What's interesting is that they show Geran drones, which means these are drones without a warhead. They're basically surveillance drones. Yeah, that's right. Look, I can't claim that someone took an Iskander missile to Sviridenko's lap and brought it up to the 7th floor of the Cabinet of Ministers. I can't claim that they took, for example, Russian drones, which, by the way, there are a lot of them falling, and just launched them from Ukrainian territory during the attack. Or, for example, it's quite possible they could have used electronic warfare to divert it. There was that strange drone that veered off course near the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. It just happened suddenly, and right during some important events. For example, yesterday there was the Ramstein meeting, and then Trump is going to call Putin, and he's announcing to everyone that now things are going to move forward. I want you to either confirm or deny this. It gives the impression, based on this whole configuration, and most importantly, the media actions, we don't know the actual facts, but the media actions, that there is already a clearly established deadline, even by Vance, to end the war by the end of this year. Well, or maybe just a little bit into 26. And now they're just trying in every possible way, you know, it's like trying to take your last breath before death, as they say.
Of course, some deadlines have been set, and as I already said, agreements have basically already been reached under the table. We can't confirm where something was delivered. For example, there was a case when Russian drones arrived, but they weren't sent. It could be, as you said, including electronic warfare. I'm not an expert, so I can't seriously assess this. But this is typical Russian behavior. We are not going to attack Ukraine. 200,000 soldiers surrounded and attacked Ukraine in February 2022. It's the same here. This is how Russia has behaved throughout its history. Nothing surprises me, but I support NATO and everyone who tries to avoid war like this, who doesn't escalate the situation, neither politically nor militarily. This is definitely smart behavior because there is a person as he is and there is a neighbor as he is. You need to try to adapt. If you're not stronger than him, try to adapt, to coexist somehow like this. These days, only Zelensky and maybe Putin want war. Europeans don't want to fight.
Who will sign the peace agreement?
I can't say the last name, but definitely not Zelensky. Definitely not Zelensky. Putin said this, and we haven't discussed the topic of the referendum that Putin mentioned yet, and which I know for sure is being discussed in the president's office. That could be the case too. A referendum, for example, could legitimize the illegitimate Zelensky.
Interesting, but how would a referendum do that? Putin was discussing territories, as I understand, and the referendum concerns territories, not Zelensky.
Look, it won't be about Zelensky. If anything, the question will concern territory. Are you ready for a specific territorial compromise? Russian language in Ukraine, yes or no? NATO path, not membership. Should we continue toward NATO? Do you want to join the European Union? These are the kinds of things that will be there. All of this is subject to negotiations at the table, but the main thing, of course, is the territories. Because this is the topic that stirs people up the most and causes feelings of injustice. This is possible, and I fully allow it to happen electronically in DIIA.
Just Whitaker, yes, the United States representative to NATO in Europe. He's saying something seditious. Listen, Ukraine agrees, along the line of demarcation, with guarantees, everything, Russian language, yes, please, church, yes, God bless, let's do it, church. Everything is fine. Ukraine agrees to everything. So it turns out Zelensky has caved, but we just weren't told about it. And how is Putin acting in this situation? He says, oh, okay, along the line of demarcation, well, fine, then we go on the offensive, take, say, the Donetsk region, or move, basically, wherever they move. That's what they'll annex to themselves. They just divided up the time like that. Well, and Zelensky's reasoning, excuse me, about Donbass, that he won't need 3 or 4 months, but years. How should we treat that?
This is just a game and a message for the domestic audience aimed at those brainwashed by propaganda. You're right, and I said the same thing. What Whitaker or Vance says is what's really happening, but the public isn't being told. And to some extent, they're just, well, let's say, exposing Zelensky with these statements. People here are hysterical about religion, about language. And I've said it. Many don't like it. I said, you're going to have a fit, because this is definitely going to happen in Ukraine. There will definitely be freedom of religion. And Russian will definitely have a special status no matter what, because half the population speaks this language. But people have been influenced by something else. And notice, he created this problem for himself, and the propaganda fueled it. Now it's hard for them to get out of this or explain things, so I think they might turn to a referendum.
Arestovich really made a splash, of course. There was also the Apple presentation, and the 17th iPhone came out, everything, and along with it, new headphones, you know, those AirPods.
With translation.
If they're, you and I both have these kinds of headphones, then we can talk in 2 languages and it will translate for us synchronously, just perfectly. Google is also testing a similar feature right now. They removed Skype and put in, basically another app. It's the same thing. You talk to a person and everything is automatically translated for you. So this whole story about the Ukrainian language, well, excuse me, but isn't it just so outdated?
It's funny. It's just funny that in 2025, when people are talking about colonizing Mars and everyone is concerned with artificial intelligence, we still have the army again. It's just like, there's a cave and they're offering you to live in a cave in 2025. And there's a whole world full of opportunities where these issues just aren't on the agenda. I've already told you about this before. Here in Miami, you can hear 60 languages from around the world in a single day with all the different dialects. That's the official statistic, 60 languages a day, and everyone gets along, everything's fine, there's nothing to speculate about, everyone's busy with their own business. But back home, it's like, let's shove you into a cave, let's separate you, let's create segregation. These same conversations keep going on, the ones that promote segregation, by people like Koczynski and others, those kinds of figures.
Korczynski actually came up with a unique formula. He says, China will swallow Russia in the Union, and we are obligated to take a bite out of it too. So can you imagine there's a war going on, this terrible war? There are no resources, there's no money in the budget, they're trying to squeeze out some extra taxes, somehow twist things around, tighten this yoke even more. Food prices keep rising, despite claims that they're falling. Korczynski wants a piece of Russia before China finishes devouring it. They're just out of touch. People watch, believe, and live by this. Why?
That always amazed me. With Korczynski, it's clear he's an agent. But you look at the views, people are actually watching this. And you think, why are you watching this? I don't have an answer. Gordon gets many views. How can anyone take this seriously? Yet people watch it. That's why everything happens the way it does. When people lose interest in this, when there's no need to expose anyone, and everything is clear to people themselves, that will mean there has been a real shift in Ukraine.
And what do you think among the statements from the European Parliament? Is it a special envoy, I think, or a special representative? Oh, a rapporteur of the European Parliament. Right. By the way, he has spoken about Ukraine and its path to the European Union more than once. Well, he deals with these issues, and he said a very interesting thing. Guys, lift the sanctions from the political opposition, release the politicians. Well, then yes, then you'll have the European Union. Well, excuse me, but is that even an option? Because, again, theoretically speaking, if you lift all the sanctions from all the politicians, not just lift the sanctions, but rehabilitate them, like, drop all the criminal cases, start with a clean slate, let's go, that would also be a big indicator. Who will end up being interesting and who won't?
Interesting for lifting sanctions?
No, after the sanctions are lifted, people who can...
From these people who were under sanctions?
Yes, those who can offer something, those who can't. What is your opinion about the current insinuations around Dubinsky, Panchenko's list, and the idea that the president's office is trying to sell this through Russians? Well, some very clever strategic political maneuvering.
If you noticed, I never comment on this topic. I'm only concerned about which names appear next to mine, since they occasionally offer me something. I refuse because some names on those lists are toxic to me. I'm definitely not letting Moscow speak for me, that's not an option, but I don't judge those in detention who use every leverage they can. I'm not sure how I'd act in that situation. I don't judge or get involved in these disputes. I only know one thing. All sanctions need to be lifted. Political prisoners should be released from prison, and issues should be resolved through debates in a democratic way regarding political power. Of course, these are some intrigues. There, Medvedchuk gets involved. Here, Levochkin gets involved. They weave their intrigues, and it was these intrigues that led the situation to war. That's why all of Ukraine lives in intrigues. Levochkin keeps weaving and intertwining these intrigues endlessly, and people are happy, and those who often call themselves journalists cover it all with such enthusiasm. I won't name the media outlets that specialized in this in Ukraine. It shouldn't be this way. Let's discuss ideas, let's discuss reforms. But if you weave intrigues, well, then we end up with war. But by the way, do you know this rumor that in a month some people are planned to have their sanctions lifted?
No, I haven't heard that rumor. Tell me what you know.
Yeah, well, there's this rumor going around that in October, sanctions will be lifted from about 10 people. And I was talking with Balashov there. We're guessing, after all, did they include those they realized they went too far with? Or maybe someone did something to get off those sanctions? Yeah?
So, someone might have done something. Well, judging by, maybe, it's also kind of like that. It's just an expression. I don't like it, but it fits. There are two carrots, one in front of your nose and one up your ass. And that's how a person is led along a certain path. Yeah, and both carrots were grown by the same person. So there's that point as well. By the way, this will also be a sign of elections and political games without a doubt. However, just to wrap up our big conversation and turn to the audience. Dennis, if we try to understand... Are there any chances? Are there simply any chances for a normal life in Ukraine? Because let's say, for example, someone comes back from the front and maybe someone with a messed up head will go looking for the Turkish armed forces officer who sent him there. As propaganda claims, we forcibly mobilized him, dragged him by his legs, shoved him into a van, and now look, he's a real commander, an eagle, insisting he went willingly. That's how they tell it about him. But reality is simpler. Reality is tougher. Reality is harsh and rough like that. And, well, when a person comes back from the front, what are you going to do? What will you have to do if he causes some kind of trouble? Arrest him? He's a war hero. So the attitude toward the war will change, and it turns out the war can only end when the attitude toward the war changes. Or is there some kind of mistake here?
Oh, people will learn so many things after the war that will disappoint them. Facts that what you described, when someone comes back with a broken head, will just add to this picture, not be the reason for their disappointment. People know well if we ignore the brainwashed propaganda. People know perfectly well that there are good people and bad people in the army, just like there are everywhere in our society. That's all. The legal framework regarding these crimes you mentioned needs to be changed. The key question, can you have a normal life in Ukraine? Answer, definitely yes, it is possible with a radically different government leadership.
I apologize, you just, look, here too, you're just hooking onto something, a really scary hook actually. So you say there are good and bad people in the army and that can be divided. That's great. It's not exactly info gypsy stuff, but it's somewhere close. Look, there are good public servants and bad ones. There are good TSCS officers and bad ones. There are cops, right? Good ones and bad ones. It fits and sticks everywhere. It clings to all these definitions. It just blurs everything. Like, the power of the public isn't there. Public, no, because what's the price of this freedom? Why do you need freedom as a society, right? For you as a citizen and for all citizens as a society. So that society can say no. But here, it turns out society says no to some bill, to some National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine officers, to something in general. No. And the president comes out, well, or the person who calls himself the president comes out and says, oh, I heard society. What society? So they segment it in the same way, saying not everyone is bad. Maybe someone should have just said, these Turkish armed forces members are a gang that must be broken up. All involved should be investigated. Those guilty punished, the rest released. And then society will say, no, we are against this. Somehow there just isn't enough radicalism.
I support radicalism and going straight to the core. However, since you brought up the military, we're discussing Turkish armed forces members here.
But the Turkish armed forces members are military.
Well, that's not all the military, right? People are risking their lives on the front lines for Ukraine.
They tell us like this, everyone, like everyone.
No, probably there. I was really interested in this. There are many people there who have fought. Of course, not everyone, but you mentioned the military. A person who came back from the front would somehow behave inappropriately there. That has always happened everywhere and will always happen everywhere. And do you want to say that there are only bad or only good people in the army? So the balance is like that. Do you think everyone in the army is good or bad?
I'll answer like this. In my opinion, everyone who is in the army now are people to whom I would only trust a television remote from management.
Wait, but why? Why are we even considering giving them something to manage, people who are at war? Except for military matters, such as building a professional army or training to fight.
But what do you mean? Why? Do you remember what Yermak wrote? What he said? He said, what kind of team would there be? All of this, all of ours.
Of course I know that, but that's a completely different topic. If you're a great warrior, that doesn't mean at all that you're a good politician, that you know what to do. That's only in Ukraine, of course. They're going to make, and they're already making great politicians out of many of them, but that's a completely different conversation. This again highlights the failure of civil society and the state, and shows the nightmare Ukraine has become. I didn't say that the military should enter the Verkhovna Rada. No, they should do their own job. Ukraine needs a professional army. Those with combat experience should train others or return to civilian life, in my view. Chevika needs to be legalized. But if someone thought, I've seen people like that already on the internet, they're not public figures, but he's already sitting there thinking he'll come to power. I'll cut out, kill, jail, or kick out these people. He twisted his mustache like a Finnish stableman and already thinks he'll take power. But there are different people. Believe me, there are probably people there who can manage something in this state. There are entrepreneurs there at war. All of that is there. I just don't like to generalize. And you mentioned freedom there. Freedom, first of all, is making decisions for yourself. I believe.
Well, there is. It's just that or rather a collective I exists. That's also true, I agree.
I completely reject all collectivism.
No, collectivism cannot be denied. It's just that the social fabric has been torn apart by the war, that's true. I mean, the social structure, the social fabric, it's been torn, only some threads remain. Well, that's basically it, friends. Let's sum up the results of our poll today. But drones in Poland, 14% believe that Russia sent them on purpose, testing NATO's resolve. 15% think it's a pattern, that something like this was bound to happen sooner or later. It was just a matter of time, as they say. 21% think it's pure coincidence, just an accident. Yes, 21% for coincidence. They flew in, caused a commotion, and apparently someone will make good money off of this, so to speak. And 51% believe that Ukraine somehow influenced this on purpose, either redirected them or did something else. Well, it's just too convenient, just way too convenient. Let me remind everyone, what did they call him? Lucky, right? They called Zelensky lucky. Maybe he's just lucky when it comes to things like this. What do you think about the results of the poll?
They won't acknowledge this 51% if it actually works against the war. As we already discussed, if Europe says we need to rearm, we're done helping Ukraine, we have plenty of our own problems. Apparently 51% just don't like Ukraine, they hate it. I don't know anything about Lucky Zelensky. I know Blokin is lucky, but not Zelensky.
Well, Blokin didn't succeed in politics, so there's that.
Well, it was a mistake, yeah.
It's just like that. The same applies to Andrei Shevchenko. We remember who supported him, Korolevskaya and all that. He was involved.
Blokin didn't earn that much and wasn't as valued by the state as he deserved. In another country, his social status would differ. And for Shevchenko, a multimillionaire, to get involved was disgraceful.
Well, on the other hand, what if things had turned out differently?
It couldn't have. Royal was so empty and Shevchenko was empty too. It couldn't have happened. I'm just amazed by the people who financed this. You know who I'm talking about. I'm just amazed at how they even carry out this negative selection.
All right, friends, let's take your questions. Thank you for liking. Please do so if you haven't already. And of course, support us with a good, kind comment. All right, let's go. So the YouTube community left quite a few questions like these. Let's figure them out. So Alexander, please ask Denise, if democracy is the best thing in the United States, why can't real democracy defeat the leftist globalists? What kind of democracy is it that can't even win in its own country, let alone in other countries? That's a good question.
I don't see anything good about it. The person mixed everything up, a different point of view, and people who think differently are actually a sign of democracy. If globalists appeared, the environment enabled it.
Well, yes, it depends on what you mean by defeating the globalists. Will globalists be defeated in France? The capture of
No, the globalists won't be defeated. In France, it's just a political crisis, which was definitely caused by the globalists. And there will be very long disputes there. By 2027, there will be a major change.
A question for Dennis. Why did he block half of his viewers just for mentioning Muriev? but complains about the lack of freedom of speech in Ukraine and talks about how free-thinking he is? What's wrong with you?
People often confuse freedom of speech when neither I nor you are responsible for it. We can't imprison, cut off internet, or expel someone as was done to us. We can only block people we dislike. When a bot farm funded by Murayev, whom I, by the way, invited to a public debate, comes after me, of course I block it. Or I block people I don't like. I spend my time I don't invite people I don't like to my place, basically.
Okay. So Artem writes, some speakers talk about the incompetence of former businessmen in politics. Are politicians skilled in business and economics? Should philosophers and religions rule the world? What are historians capable of? Thank you for your answer.
Historians should focus on history. Religious figures should focus on religion. If religion runs a country, that's already a theocracy, a religious state. Entrepreneurs are excellent managers, as we can see from Trump's team and what we see in El Salvador. And professional politicians, those in nice suits who always speak very politically correct, lead, for example, to what is happening now in France. They lead to wars, they lead to crises. It leads to the fact that Russia can produce much more ammunition than all of NATO combined. That's what these polished professional politicians lead to. It's time for the right wing and entrepreneurs in politics, but only briefly, as entrepreneurs aren't suited for politics by nature. This is done in order to fulfill oneself, to make history.
All right, next question, 2. From Alexandra, the $50 million reward announced by the United States for the president of Venezuela, declared under the pretext of fighting drugs. A test tube with snot, that's democracy in the Iranian scenario, but we all know it's really about oil. Question mark. And the second question, from the 3rd to the 8th year, Iraq was democratically occupied by Ukraine and the United States of America. Does firing an American soldier for opposing the Israeli genocide in Gaza show real freedom of speech in the United States of America? Go ahead and react to either one if you want.
When it comes to supporting terrorists, people think that freedom of speech means anything goes, and libertarianism is just complete lawlessness. No, if you support terrorists, that's punishable. These are people who are twisting the meaning of things. Does the writer really think Maduro is acceptable? Killing, imprisoning, rigging elections, terrorizing, does this person see that as normal? Then no.
What did you say, Zelensky?
Maduro?
Oh, Maduro, sorry, I thought I misheard. Yes, go on.
There was a question about Maduro. Well, Zelensky...
I'm just kidding, Dennis.
Yeah, I understand, but Zelensky is getting close to that. Getting close. I often compare them, since all dictators generally use the same methods.
So, Ivan, could it be that Zelensky is planning a 5th partition of Poland? Isn't the partition of Ukraine enough for him? Who is this staged scene with supposedly suppressed rep drones meant for? How did these suppressed drones manage to fly hundreds of miles? In Russia, for some reason, they almost always crash right away.
I don't know. That's just how he is. He always knows everything ahead of time. We're just talking unsure, just thinking out loud. I envy the person who knows everything.
Dennis Smirnov asks, when will Zelensky be removed from power? On important streams at the beginning of summer, you predicted the start of certain events in the fall. Is that still valid?
Yes, everything's still valid, but people want it immediately again. Right now, everything is happening. They're sawing the legs off the chair that Zelensky is sitting on. It's a gradual process.
So that means, Yosef, Zelensky refuses Putin's conditions for ending the war, hiding behind an obviously meaningless phrase, "We won't give up a single meter of land." If you look only at the facts, one thing is clear. Zelensky's actions will lead to the loss of more regions as well as access to the sea. Question for our studio guest. Based on the military campaign, can we say Zelensky is serving the Kremlin and destroying Ukraine?
Well, whether he is working for them or not, I don't know. But the fact that he is beneficial to the Kremlin is absolutely certain. And definitely, if the war continues, we will keep losing territory. But look, I've always told people, don't listen to Zelensky, listen to Trump. Today I can say, listen to James David Vance. James David Vance said, Ukraine is ready to make peace, to exchange territories under the condition of such security guarantees. That's it.
Edward, yesterday I was scrolling through your Telegram channel, Denise, And I came across your comment that Czechs consider themselves Germans. No offense, but I'd like to ask, how has the wonderful American air affected you, or is it still the result of basic Ukrainian education? Thank you for your honesty.
That's a rude question. I know quite a few people who have lived in the Czech Republic for a long time, and they say that the vast majority really do consider themselves Germans. I'm inclined to trust these people.
Well, Czechs in general, Slavic,
Well, in general, kind of yes, but really there's no reason not to trust this information. If it was just one person who told me this, but actually many people who have lived there for a long time told me this. Maybe they are Slavs, but over a bottle of beer they say, we are Germans. We consider ourselves Germans.
In general, of course, this is also a very interesting and separate topic, since we haven't really touched on Europe today in terms of lifestyles. Well, it's clear that Poland is a hot topic these days, but if you think about it, it's kind of like a patchwork blanket there too, right?
Of course.
It's really interesting there, and when you're there, there's this term that Russians like to use in comments. They write the word virus. Yeah, it's a widespread phenomenon in Europe. That is, people who live, let's say, near the Mediterranean Sea, people who live in Central Europe, in the mountains, for example. They mix together like that, and it might seem like, for example, Dennis is talking nonsense because that's not true. How can a Czech claim he's German? Yet that's the situation. He looks Slavic with our features, hair, and eyes, but says, I'm German. Well, that's how it happens. And over there in Europe, it's very common, and in Spain too.
That's the plain truth.
And in France too. So that's just how it is. Andre, on a day-to-day level, the fight against the Russian language is often led by people who speak Surgic and who probably wouldn't pass a Ukrainian language exam. In your opinion, would a slogan like Surgic speakers are just a calque of the Russian language turn these defenders of the language into the ones being defended against, making them feel what it's like to give up their own norms and habits?
Probably yes, but that would only increase division in society. It just needs to be settled once and for all at the legislative level. And for those who try to stir things up, that's what the criminal code is for. That's basically extremism. In fact, it is extremism.
Okay. Now, Dennis is asking you a question. Basically, there's a super builder, a user who says, in your opinion, why does the app of the post-Soviet state bank Sber, which holds more than half of the assets in Russia's banking system, is technologically several generations ahead of any American private bank app, even those with much larger assets and a more competitive environment?
Not only that, what about Russian ones? In Ukraine, the apps are ahead. I can confirm that for you. They're much more convenient than American ones, much better. Let me explain. America as a country and these systemically important banks, they are such giants that it's very slow and very difficult for them to change direction. It's a huge corporate system. It's very old. But a country like Ukraine or Russia, the technology arrived later and everything was quickly improved and caught up. There was less regulation and these countries succeeded in that. That's true. I can confirm that. That's why I believe Ukraine is a great country. We can learn from all negative experiences, not just ours, and create something amazing.
Well, I won't. It's not good to joke about candies. Anyway, a user from the chat, let's take a look at the chat as well. Dennis, what do you think about splitting Ukraine into 3 states, one Russian-influenced, one central, and one Western? What's your view?
There is no such proposal. This was said by Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, who also, let's note, surely knows something from both Trump's side and Putin's side. He has excellent relations with both of them. That sounds harsh. I think it's just a formality. I am against any kind of division in any case, but it's quite possible that things like this are inevitable. I don't know. Things have gone too far.
Please ask, has Dennis already built a logistics business in the United States with a 6-figure turnover? That's the question, right?
I didn't try to build the logistics business I had. It was actually passenger transportation, not logistics. This business model doesn't exist in the United States, so I didn't try it here. That's a strange question.
Okay, so you don't admit that you could be wrong in your opinions? Arthur writes that you don't admit that you could be wrong in your judgments and conclusions. You consider yourself the ultimate bearer of truth, but there are many people who don't share your views. What should we do about them?
Nothing. I am a bearer of the ideology I believe in, which has proven itself as the only one in terms of effectiveness and success, and I promote it. That's how I see it. Listen, in my Telegram channel, about 40% of people have a different opinion, or they don't fully agree or don't fully understand. This is a completely natural process.
Okay. Zelensky was at a reception at the Bilderberg Club in July, where he was thanked for providing Ukrainian territory for testing new weapons, and they said the war needs to be prolonged for another 2 or 3 years. What do you think about this?
Well, I wasn't there, unlike the person asking this question, so I can't confirm or deny it.
Sergei, will Eliseevich return to Ukraine if another person becomes president?
Of course, yes. Of course, yes. Of course, what other option is there? If the Zelensky regime ceases to exist and the special services stop doing what they're doing, then of course, yes.
Ask, Dennis, do you still have presidential ambitions? Sanya is asking.
I'm not a politician. In order to declare such things, well, rather to run for office, you can declare anything you want, but to actually run for office, I need to feel people truly need this and that there's a real chance. And sitting in studios yelling at someone like Leshko, that's not interesting to me.
Yes, friends, thank you all for being here tonight, or half evening, since for Dennis it's morning. You joined our stream, our live broadcast. Thank you for your reactions and your participation. Write good, kind comments. Check out Dennis's channel. Please leave likes. It's kind of a ritual. Dennis, thank you for your time and thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you to the viewers.
Take care. Wishing everyone kindness and light always. See you.